ICBMs. Sometimes doxing the IP address just isn't enough. It takes a 25 megaton warhead to their home address to send a message. Unfortunately, my Temu support agent ghosted me mid-ICBM transaction. But hey, at least we can still LARP online and build our very own ICBMs in the new Besiege Broken Beyond expansion. But Silexian, you say, I already bought the expansion and I can't even pass the first level. Don't worry my friend, because this video is a paid collaboration with Spiderling Studios, and they've asked me to make a tutorial on the new mechanics and blocks in this expansion. Hey, I didn't come here to watch a tutorial. Hush. Everything is going to be okay. You saw the thumbnail. This is still a Silexian video. I'm building a realistic intercontinental ballistic missile that will follow the stages of a real ICBM launch. This missile will have to launch from one continent and hit a target on another continent on the expansion's largest planet. But since this video will include tutorials, this build will be completely vanilla, no mods. And the entire thing has to fit in the bounding box, because I hate myself. So, let's begin. First things first, we gotta build a rocket. And after some intense research, I've developed this menacing rocket body inspired by the goat, Wowdy Coyote. It's got a large cavity and multiple decouplers to break open like a clam to release the payload. So, putting my faith in Acme Corporation Engineering, I'm pretty confident this is gonna work. Okay, let's talk about fuel. In Broken Beyond, a fuel system is defined by small or large fuel barrels. These barrels become one system if they're attached directly, or linked by fuel hoses or fuel couplers. The caveman solution is to just add a bunch of extra fuel, but that increases weight. This brings us to the tyranny of the rocket equation. We need fuel to reach our destination, but the more fuel we carry, the more weight, which means we need even more fuel, and so on. One way to mitigate this is staging. This will at least help us drop the dead weight and extra drag from empty fuel tanks. To help, the fuel gauge block can emulate a key press once a set fuel level is reached within its connected network. I can use this to trigger a booster disconnect and kick off the next stage. So, let's implement this into our ICBM. I've got 4 booster rockets that launch first. Once this fuel gauge hits 0, it triggers the booster disconnect and kicks off the main body thrusters. Congratulations to me. I've just built the slowest rocket of all time, because another thing I need to balance is the number of boosters. The more booster blocks, the more force, and the faster the acceleration. However, we also consume fuel faster. So, after some trial and error, I finally landed on having 3 booster blocks on each booster and 7 boosters on my main body. Now this should work, right? Oh. Take more than that to impress me. Oh, there's another problem: stability. We want to go up, not spiral down like some bald eagle mating ritual. So let's talk about 2 types of stability: passive and active. Stay hard! Starting with passive stability. While in atmosphere, aero blocks like rocket fins, wing blocks, and propeller blocks can all be used as fins for stability. In addition, we should align our center of thrust with our center of mass. This tool visualizes our center of mass. Then we can use building tools like the rotation or mirror tool to ensure symmetry. Otherwise, a torque gets induced on the body and causes instability. But here's the thing. Even with passive stability techniques, the slightest instabilities still spiral my ICBM out of control. So we have to fight back with active control, countering any unwanted rotation by applying a force to steer in the opposite direction. While in atmosphere, we can steer with fins and push with aero blocks at the top. But in space, there is no longer an atmosphere for these aero blocks to push or pull. So instead, we use control thrusters. Control thruster blocks expel gas in one direction or the opposite. They provide negligible force in the atmosphere, but provide fine control in space. For the actual steering, manually fighting instability can be difficult.
What are you doing? I could be doing anything.
So let's use logic blocks instead. For this, I'm using anglometers, 2 for each axis. If the rocket turns too much one way on an axis, one of these 2 anglometers activates. The same happens on the other side. Then I just connect the anglometer outputs to my active control blocks. Now our payload goes into orbit instead of back into us. I ended up adding a lot of fins because the ICBM still had trouble staying stable. The main issue was that the airspeed was too slow for the fins to provide stability. So I added the 4 flying blocks hidden within the main body towards the nose to provide more corrective force while in the atmosphere. Now that we have a working rocket, let's make the payload. I'll have to be efficient with space because there is not a lot of room in the main body capsule. Let's start with the bombs, for which I put in 3. Because it's going to be a fast re-entry into atmosphere, I have to heat shield the bombs to stop the payload from becoming a firework. In Broken Beyond, you can use these metal blocks as heat shields. So I built a capsule covering the bombs out of armor and blade blocks. Now that my warhead can actually make it to the ground, let's make sure it will be oriented correctly. To handle this, I deploy grid fins on the back end. The drag helps with orientation and slightly slows down the payload. If you want to build a craft that actually needs to survive the landing, you can use parachutes. Just remember to heat shield them too. My payload capsule also has 3 decouplers, which blast it open like a clam to release the bombs above the target. Now that the payload capsule is complete, we need a way to steer it to the target while in space. Thankfully, Broken Beyond already comes with a predictive trajectory tool. This tool appears when I zoom out and is color-coded with the following. Since there's no atmosphere, we can't use any fin, wing, or propeller blocks. We also can't use steam cannons as they will sputter in space and provide inconsistent force. So we'll need to use control thrusters and inertial steering. Control thrusters are weak and provide fine movement. It's best to place them further from the center of mass, so the added leverage gives more movement. Inertial steering blocks, on the other hand, are spinning masses that spin the craft in the opposite direction using inertia. They are very powerful. There are other options available too, like putting the booster on a gimbal. In space, objects in motion like to stay in motion, so both control thrusters and inertial steering blocks have counter rotation modes to automatically brake and stop rotation in space. To counter linear movement, you need to deaccelerate by pushing in the opposite direction. So, for my payload, I added 2 inertial steering blocks and 2 control thrusters. This inertial steering block provides yaw. This inertial steering block provides roll, and these control thrusters provide pitch. Finally, I added this booster and barrels to continue accelerating the payload and give me control over range. So once the payload enters space, I manually steer it into the target using the predictive trajectory tool. Now we can slide the payload into the main body, and it just barely fits. Good job me. Okay, I lied. I wish I was that good, but to be honest, my original body design looked like this. Until the payload didn't fit, and yeah. But now that I've come clean, you should totally reward my honesty with a like and a subscribe. Alright, the ICBM is finally complete. However, there is one obvious issue. It doesn't fit in the bounding box vertically. However, it does fit horizontally. So I added these wheels, ropes, and a harpoon launcher. This harpoon launcher latches to the scaffolding tower and works with the bottom ropes to pull this ICBM up before everything detaches. I thought this looked a bit goofy at first, but it reminds me of those ICBM trucks, which is pretty cool. Finally, since there are a ton of buttons for raising the rocket, launching each stage, and etc., I automated everything with these timer blocks, so I only have to press one button to launch the ICBM. Now we have a working ICBM. I've kept you all waiting long enough. Let's see this thing in action. And there you have it, folks, a working, realistic ICBM. Now there are definitely some distinctions, like the fact it's made primarily out of wood, or the fact it goes straight up instead of slowly curving before leaving the atmosphere, but overall I'm pretty happy with the finished build, and I hope the new players learned from this video as well. If you haven't already, I highly recommend you to download Besiege and the expansion. Thanks for watching, and let me know what you want to see in the comments below.